The castle walls wept with condensation, tiny rivulets tracking down ancient stone like silent tears. I paused at the threshold of the service corridor, my fingers tracing the damp surface, coming away slick and cold. The air hung heavy here, thick with the scent of iron and something older, a metallic sweetness that clung to the back of my throat. My breath clouded before me in the dim light that filtered through narrow windows cut high into the eastern wall, dust motes dancing in the pale morning beams. I adjusted my uniform, smoothing the gray fabric with trembling hands. 3 weeks at Hale Manor, and still my heart hammered against my ribs each morning. Not from the rumors of what dwelled within these halls, those had drawn me here after all, but from the weight of purpose that pressed upon my shoulders. The service bell chimed, a soft, insistent trill that echoed through the corridor. I flinched at the sound, though I'd been expecting it. My shoes whispered against the stone as I moved forward, past the kitchen where Helen stood kneading dough, her weathered hands working with mechanical precision. She didn't look up as I passed, but her voice followed me. "Mind yourself today, Emma. The little one had a rough night." I nodded, though she couldn't see it, and continued on my way. The manor grew colder as I ascended the spiral staircase to the east wing, as if winter had taken permanent residence in this part of the house. My breath came in visible puffs now, and I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. The portraits lining the hallway watched me with painted eyes that seemed to track my movement. Generations of Hales, their pale faces aristocratic and severe. I'd learned to keep my gaze fixed ahead, to ignore the prickling sensation at the nape of my neck as I passed beneath their scrutiny. But today, one portrait drew my attention, despite my best efforts. A woman with eyes the color of spring leaves, her expression softer than the others. Something in her face reminded me of my grandmother. I paused, studying her features. The plaque beneath read simply, Elizabeth Hale, 1843-1872. She died young, even for human standards. My fingers itched to touch the canvas, to feel if any warmth remained in those painted eyes, but I curled them into my palm instead. The rules had been made abundantly clear. Touch nothing that wasn't part of my duties. And my duties awaited me behind the heavy oak door at the end of the hall. I raised my hand to knock, but hesitated as a sound reached me through the thick wood, a soft whimpering, like that of a wounded animal. My knuckles hovered inches from the door as the whimper crescendoed into a keening wail that raised the fine hairs on my arms. "Lucas?" I called, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. The wailing stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it seemed to have physical weight. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. The doorknob was cold enough to burn when I finally wrapped my fingers around it, turning it with agonizing slowness. The room beyond lay in near total darkness, heavy velvet curtains drawn against the morning light. I blinked, waiting for my eyes to adjust to the gloom. The air felt different here, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name but recognized in my bones. It smelled of fever and fear, of sleepless nights and silent screams. "Lucas?" I called again, taking a tentative step forward. "It's Emma. I've come to help with your lessons today." A rustling sound came from the far corner of the room, followed by a small voice that didn't sound entirely human. "You shouldn't be here. Not today." I moved toward the voice, careful to keep my steps slow and deliberate. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out the shape of a child huddled beneath the desk, knees drawn up to his chest, arms wrapped tightly around them. Lucas, 8 years old, and bearing a curse no child should have to carry. Your father asked me to come, I said softly, crouching down a few feet away from him. Close enough to show I wasn't afraid, far enough to give him space. He thought we might read together this morning. Lucas raised his head slightly, and my breath caught. His eyes, normally a warm amber like his father's, now glowed a vivid crimson in the darkness, pupils contracted to pinpoints. Bloodthirst. I'd been briefed about it, warned about it, but seeing it was another matter entirely. He's wrong, Lucas whispered, his voice cracking. I can smell you from here. My heart stuttered in my chest, but I forced myself to remain still. To show fear now would only make things worse. What do I smell like? I asked, genuinely curious despite the danger. The boy inhaled deeply, his small nostrils flaring. Like sunshine. And something else. Something that hurts. Hurts? I shifted slightly, the floorboards creaking beneath me. Makes the thirst worse, he clarified, pressing himself further into the corner. Please go. I don't want to hurt anyone else. Anyone else. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I thought of the rumors that had circulated in the village, of the previous tutors and maids who had left the manor's service abruptly, of the local children warned never to venture near the Hale property. Lucas, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm not going anywhere. Your father hired me because I'm different. Remember? The boy's crimson eyes narrowed, studying me with an intensity no child should possess. Different how? He demanded, a hint of his father's authority creeping into his voice despite his fear. I hesitated. This wasn't how I'd planned to introduce my ability. Not during an episode of bloodthirst. Not when Lucas was already vulnerable and frightened. But plans rarely survived contact with reality, my grandmother always said. I can feel what others feel, I explained, keeping my voice low and even. And sometimes, if I try very hard, I can help them feel something else instead. Lucas's brow furrowed, the glow in his eyes flickering momentarily. Like Dr. Price's medicines? No. I shook my head. The medicines suppress what you feel. What I do is more like sharing the burden. I inched closer, my knees aching against the hard floor. May I show you? He shrank back, panic flashing across his features. No, you can't touch me, not now. I won't touch you without permission, I promised, settling back on my heels to reassure him. But Lucas, has anyone ever touched you during bloodthirst before? The boy's expression shifted to something between confusion and sorrow. Only father, when he has to hold me down for the injections. His small fingers dug into his arms, leaving white impressions in the pale skin. And once, when Damon had to stop me from reaching a village girl who came too close to the gates. My chest tightened at the image. A child restrained, fighting against his own nature, terrified of what lived inside him. No wonder he hid in corners. No wonder he spoke of himself as something to be feared. The bloodthirst, I said carefully. What does it feel like? Lucas looked at me as if no one had ever asked him this before. Perhaps no one had. Like being hollow, he whispered after a long moment. Like there's nothing inside me but hunger, and it hurts. And the only thing that will make it stop hurting is... He broke off, shame coloring his features. Blood, I finished for him. He nodded miserably. Human blood. Animal blood helps a little, but father says it's like trying to quench a forest fire with a teacup of water. A sudden crash from the hallway made us both jump. Heavy footsteps approached, and Lucas's eyes widened in renewed panic. Hide, he hissed. It's getting worse. I can't hold it back much longer. I rose to my feet just as the door burst open, revealing King Rowan Hale himself, his imposing figure silhouetted against the light from the hallway. Behind him stood Damon Rourke, the security advisor, his hand resting casually on what I knew must be a weapon. "Miss Collins," the king's voice was glacial, "you were instructed never to be alone with my son without prior authorization." I stood my ground, though every instinct screamed at me to cower before this man, this being who had ruled the vampire clans for over a century. "With respect, Your Majesty, I was summoned here by the morning bell." "A mistake," he said curtly. "Helen was to inform you that today's lessons were cancelled." "She told me to mind myself," I said. "She mentioned Lucas had a difficult night." The king's eyes, the same amber as his son's in their normal state, flicked to the corner where Lucas remained huddled. Something passed across his face then, not the cold authority he presented to the world, but a father's anguish, quickly masked. "Lucas," he said, his tone gentler now. "Dr. Price is on her. Way with your medication." "No!" The boy's cry was sharp with desperation. "Not the needle, Father. Please. It makes everything go away, even the good parts." I watched the king's jaw tighten, the struggle evident in the rigid set of his shoulders. This was a conversation they'd had many times before, with the same outcome. "There are no good parts to bloodthirst, Lucas," he said firmly. "We've discussed this." I stepped forward before I could think better of it. "Your Majesty, if I might—" "You might not, Miss Collins." He cut me off without looking at me. "Damon, escort Miss Collins back to the staff quarters. I'll deal with this situation." Damon moved toward me, his expression impassive but his intent clear. I had seconds to act before I was removed from the room, removed from Lucas when he needed me most. Not just as a tutor, but as what I truly was, what my grandmother had trained me to be. "I can help him," I blurted, loud enough to make Damon pause. "Not just with his studies, with the bloodthirst." The king turned to me slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Explain yourself, quickly." My mouth went dry under his scrutiny, but I forced the words out. My grandmother was an empath, a true empath, not just sensitive to emotions, but able to influence them. She worked with your kind before the Accords. A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, crossed the king's features. "Collins," he murmured, as if seeing me for the first time. "Evelyn Collins's granddaughter." I nodded, heart pounding. "She taught me before she died. I'm not as strong as she was, but I can help Lucas, if you'll let me try." The king studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Damon. "Wait outside. Close the door." Damon hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave his king alone with a human and a blood-crazed child. "Sir." "Now, Damon." The security advisor withdrew, the door closing behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the tense silence. "If you're lying about your abilities," the king said quietly, "or if you harm my son in any way, there won't be enough left of you to bury. Do you understand?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Father," Lucas's voice trembled from his corner. "I'm afraid." The king's expression softened fractionally. "I know, son, but we must try everything that might help." He looked back at me. "What do you need to do?" "I need to touch him," I said, "and he needs to let me." Lucas shook his head violently. "I'll hurt her. I'll bite her. I know I will." I moved toward him slowly, kneeling down again to meet his eyes. Those terrible, beautiful crimson eyes, bright with hunger and fear. You might, I acknowledged, but I don't think you will. The king remained where he stood, but I could feel the tension radiating from him, his body coiled to spring if his son made a move toward my throat. Lucas, I said softly, I'm going to reach out now. All you have to do is take my hand. Can you do that? The boy stared at my outstretched palm as if it were both salvation and damnation. His small chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. What if I can't stop? Then your father will stop you, I said simply. But first, let's try. I inched closer, my hand steady despite the fear coursing through me. Lucas uncurled slightly, his own hand trembling as he extended it toward mine. I could see his fingernails had sharpened into points, another sign of bloodthirst that the briefing materials had mentioned. The moment stretched between us, time seeming to slow as his cold fingers hovered above my palm. Behind me, I heard the king shift his weight, ready to intervene. The air in the room felt charged, as if before a lightning strike. Lucas's fingers touched mine. A jolt of sensation shot up my arm. Not pain, but a hunger so intense it stole my breath. Emptiness clawed at my insides. A desperate, primal need that threatened to consume everything I was. I gasped, fighting the urge to snatch my hand away. Instead, I closed my fingers around his, holding tight as I pushed back against the hunger with everything I had. I sent warmth through our connection, conjuring memories of sunlight on my face, of my grandmother's kitchen filled with the scent of baking bread, of the quiet contentment of reading by a fire on a winter evening. Lucas's eyes widened, the crimson glow flickering like a candle in a draught. "What are you?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "How are you?" I shuffled closer, still holding his hand, and slowly, carefully, I opened my arms. An invitation, not a demand. For a moment, he remained frozen, caught between instinct and hope. Then, with a small sound that might have been a sob, he lunged forward. Not for my throat, but into my embrace. I wrapped my arms around his small frame, feeling him tremble against me as I poured everything I had into our connection. The hunger still raged, but now it battled with something else, something warm and human and desperately needed. Over Lucas's head, I met the king's gaze. His expression had transformed from cold authority to naked astonishment. In that moment, I understood that I was witnessing something unprecedented, something that, according to everything he knew about his son's condition, should have been impossible. "The bloodthirst," he breathed. "It's receding without the medication." I nodded, still holding Lucas as his trembling gradually subsided. The boy's breathing slowed, his body growing heavier against mine as tension drained from him. "How?" the king demanded, moving closer now, kneeling beside us with none of the regal distance he'd maintained before. In 200 years of recorded cases, human touch has only ever exacerbated bloodthirst, never calmed it. I looked down at Lucas, whose eyes had faded from crimson to a softer amber, though still not their normal hue. His small fingers clutched at my uniform, as if afraid I might disappear if he let go. "I don't know," I admitted. "But my grandmother always said some bloodlines recognize each other across the centuries. She told me stories about our ancestors and yours, about bonds that existed before the wars, before the Accords." The king's expression changed, something like recognition dawning in his eyes. "What else did your grandmother tell you about your family's history with mine?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Lucas stirred in my arms, looking up at me with eyes now more curious than hungry. You feel like home, he murmured, his voice heavy with approaching sleep. Like I've known you forever. The king's gaze sharpened, moving from his son to me with new intensity. Miss Collins, he said, his voice low and urgent. I believe we need to have a conversation about exactly who you are and why. A sudden commotion in the hallway cut him off. The door burst open, revealing Dr. Price with her medical bag and Helen behind her, both women freezing at the tableau before them. The king of vampires kneeling on the floor beside a human woman who held his cursed son in her arms. Impossible, Dr. Price whispered, her clinical detachment cracking. The bloodthirst she should be dead, Helen finished, her eyes fixed not on Lucas but on me, a strange mixture of fear and recognition in her gaze. Unless she's exactly who I think she is. The king rose to his feet in one fluid motion, authority settling back over him like a cloak. Dr. Price, your services won't be needed this morning. Helen, prepare the North Study. Miss Collins and I need to discuss her family's connection to mine. He turned back to me, his expression unreadable. A connection that, it seems, may be far more significant than either of us realized when you first arrived at my door, claiming to be just a tutor, seeking employment. Lucas's grip on my uniform tightened, his eyes finding mine with sudden clarity despite his exhaustion. You're not just here to teach me, are you? He asked, a child's perception cutting through adult deceptions. You came here because of what I am, because of what we are to each other. I finished for him, my voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. Lucas's words hung in the air, a truth I'd been carrying since my grandmother's deathbed confession 3 months ago. The king's eyes narrowed, calculating, as if reassessing everything he thought he knew about me. Helen, he said without looking away from me, take Lucas to his chambers. He needs rest. No. Lucas's fingers dug into my sleeve. I want Emma to stay with me. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. I'll come find you after I speak with your father, I promise. Helen approached cautiously, as if I might be dangerous. When she reached for Lucas, her hands trembled slightly. Come, young prince. Miss Collins will return soon. Lucas reluctantly let go, but his eyes, now returned to their normal deep brown, stayed fixed on mine until Helen led him from the room. Dr. Price followed them, casting one last bewildered glance over her shoulder. When the door closed, I rose shakily to my feet, smoothing my blood-spattered uniform. The king circled me slowly, a predator assessing prey. You're an empath, he said finally. Not just any empath, a Collins. I lifted my chin. Yes. Your grandmother was Evelyn Collins. The sound of her name in his mouth made my heart stutter. You knew her. I knew all the Collins women. His voice carried centuries of memory. For generations, your family has been uniquely equipped to handle my kind. But the line was supposed to have ended. Evelyn had no children. She had a daughter, my mother. I swallowed hard. She died when I was young. Grandmother raised me, but she never told me what I was until she was dying. The king stopped his circling, standing too close. I could feel the cold radiating from his skin. And what exactly did she tell you? That our bloodline carries a gift, that we can touch the cursed without succumbing to their hunger, that we can calm the storm inside them. I met his gaze steadily. She told me about Lucas, about the curse that's killing him. She made me promise to come. Why would Evelyn Collins, who despised me for over 50 years, send her granddaughter to help my son? I looked down at my hands, still stained with Lucas's tears, because she knew what it was to lose a child. Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps recognition. Then his features hardened again. The North Study. Now. The North Study smelled of leather, wood smoke, and ancient paper. Massive bookshelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with volumes whose spines bore titles in languages I couldn't read. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the dark paneling. The king stood with his back to me, hands clasped behind him, staring into the flames. I remained near the door, uncertain. "Your grandmother was the most powerful empath I've ever encountered," he said without turning. She could bring a raging vampire to his knees with a touch, make him feel every ounce of pain he'd ever inflicted. He paused. "I know this because she did it to me. Once." I tried to imagine my grandmother, who'd taught me to bake cookies and bandaged my skinned knees, bringing the vampire king to his knees. The image wouldn't form. "Why?" I asked. "Because I deserved it." He turned finally, his face half in shadow. "Your family and mine have a complicated history, Miss Collins, one that stretches back centuries. I don't understand. Grandmother only told me about Lucas, about his condition. His curse," the king corrected sharply. "Call it what it is. My son is cursed, and it's killing him. The bloodthirst grows stronger with each episode, and one day it will consume him entirely." His voice remained steady, but I saw how his fingers tightened on the back of the chair before him. "Unless you can help him." "I don't know if I can. I barely understand what I am." "But you felt it, didn't you? When you touched him. The connection." I nodded slowly. It was like I could feel the hunger inside him, like I could draw it into myself somehow, but it couldn't harm me. "That's the Collins gift." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. This will take some time to explain." I sank into the offered seat, the leather cool against my back. The king remained standing, too restless for stillness. Centuries ago, during the Great Purge, when humans hunted our kind to near extinction, a vampire lord saved a human woman from being burned as a witch. Her name was Margaret Collins. He watched my face as he spoke. She possessed a unique ability. Her touch could soothe the bloodthirst. In gratitude for saving her life, she swore that her descendants would always stand as mediators between humans and vampires. "But that's not the whole story, is it?" I asked, sensing the gaps in his telling. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Perceptive. No, it's not. Margaret Collins and that vampire lord fell in love, a forbidden union that produced unexpected consequences." My heart pounded. "What consequences?" "The Collins women became something neither fully human nor vampire, empaths with the unique ability to withstand and absorb our darkest hungers." He paused. "And my son's curse is no ordinary bloodthirst. It's ancient magic, vengeance from a rival clan. It can only be managed by someone with Collins blood." The weight of his words settled over me. "That's why grandmother sent me here." "Yes, though I'm surprised she did. The last time I saw Evelyn Collins, she swore her family would never serve mine again." "She didn't send me to serve you," I said firmly. "She sent me to help Lucas." The king studied me, his expression unreadable. "And you believe you can?" "I don't know, but today when he was in the grip of it, I felt something change when I held him, like I was drawing the darkness out." He nodded slowly. "That's how it begins. But managing the curse requires more than occasional intervention. It would mean staying close to him, being there whenever the bloodthirst rises." "You're offering me a position," I'm offering you a purpose, Miss Collins. The one your bloodline was meant for. Before I could respond, the door opened. Damon Rourke entered, his face tight with tension. My king, forgive the interruption. We've received word from the Vale clan. Their emissary arrives tomorrow. The king's expression darkened. Marcus Vale comes earlier than expected. Yes, sir. And he brings accusations regarding the prince's condition. I felt the temperature in the room drop as the king's anger radiated like frost. Of course he does. The Vales have been waiting for any opportunity to challenge my fitness to rule. He turned to me. It seems your decision must come sooner rather than later, Miss Collins. By tomorrow, everyone will know about my son's curse, and about you. That night, I sat on the edge of Lucas's bed, watching him sleep. The moonlight filtered through the heavy curtains, casting his face in silver. He looked so ordinary in slumber, just a little boy with tousled hair and long eyelashes, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Hard to believe that just hours ago, he'd been consumed by a hunger that could have killed me. He's never slept this peacefully after an episode. I startled at the king's voice. He stood in the doorway, a tall shadow against the hallway light. I didn't hear you come in, I whispered. Vampire, he reminded me with the faintest hint of amusement. He approached silently, stopping at the foot of the bed. Usually, he's restless for days, plagued by nightmares. I looked down at Lucas, at my hand resting lightly on his smaller one. I can feel it still, the hunger. It's dormant now, but it's there, like something coiled inside him. Can you feel when it might rise again? I closed my eyes, focusing on the strange connection between us. Not soon. It's sleeping. But it will come back. It always does. The king's voice carried a weariness that seemed to reach beyond normal exhaustion. And each time it's stronger. How did it happen? I asked. Grandmother wouldn't tell me. He was silent so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, a blood curse, cast by Victoria Harlow, my former royal advisor. His jaw tightened. She wanted the throne. When I refused to make her my queen, she took her revenge on my son. That's monstrous. Yes. His eyes, when they met mine, burned with banked fury. She's been in exile since that day, but her curse remains. And tomorrow, Marcus Vale will use it to challenge my right to rule. Because of Lucas's condition. Because a king who cannot protect his own son from a blood curse is seen as weak. He moved to the window, staring out at the night. The vampire clans respect only strength and control. Lucas's curse suggests I have neither. I studied his profile, sharp against the moonlight. You're not what I expected. He glanced back, one eyebrow raised. And what did you expect, Miss Collins? A monster, I admitted. Grandmother's stories painted you as cruel, heartless. Perhaps I was once. He looked back at his sleeping son. Centuries of existence can calcify the soul, but Lucas, he changed everything. The vulnerability in his voice surprised me. I'd never imagined the vampire king could love so deeply. I'll stay, I said suddenly, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it. I'll help him. His eyes found mine, searching. You understand what that means? You would be bound to this household, to my son. The bloodthirst can strike without warning. I understand. And you would face danger beyond the curse. Marcus Vale and his clan will see you as a threat, a human with power over our kind. I'm not afraid. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps you should be, Miss Collins. He moved toward the door, then paused. Rest. Tomorrow will test us all. After he left, I remained beside Lucas, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Outside, an owl called into the night, its cry echoing across the grounds. I thought of my grandmother's final words to me. The Hale boy needs you, Emma. And perhaps, though he doesn't know it yet, the king needs you too. The Vale emissary arrived at precisely noon, when the sun stood highest in the sky and the vampire court was at its weakest. A calculated insult, Helen explained as she helped me into a formal gray dress that morning. Marcus Vale is old school, she said, her fingers deftly fastening the buttons at my back. Believes humans should know their place. He won't like what you represent. And what's that? I asked, watching her in the mirror. Her eyes met mine in the reflection. Hope. Change. She smoothed the fabric over my shoulders. The king hasn't allowed a human to attend court in over 50 years. Not since my grandmother, I finished. Helen nodded. Evelyn Collins was formidable. Vale feared her. They all did. I swallowed hard. I'm not her. No, Helen agreed, turning me to face her. But you have her blood. And you did something yesterday that no one has managed in 3 years. You calmed the prince's bloodthirst. She pressed something cool into my palm. Wear this. It belonged to her. I opened my hand to find a silver brooch, intricately designed with intertwining vines surrounding a small blue stone. Lapis lazuli, Helen explained. Protection against certain influences. As I pinned it to my dress, a knock sounded at the door. Damon Rourke stood in the hallway, his usual stern expression firmly in place. The king requests your presence in the Great Hall, Miss Collins. The walk through the palace corridors felt endless. Servants and court members stopped to stare as we passed, whispers following in our wake. I kept my chin high, remembering grandmother's advice. Never let them see your fear. Vampires can smell it. The Great Hall took my breath away. Soaring ceilings with intricate wooden beams, stained glass windows casting jewel-toned light across stone floors. At the far end, a dais held a single throne of dark wood and silver, where King Rowan sat with perfect stillness. Lucas stood beside him, looking small and solemn in formal clothes, his dark hair neatly combed. When he saw me, his face brightened, but a subtle gesture from his father kept him in place. Damon led me to stand at the foot of the dais, then took his position at the king's right hand. The assembled court, perhaps 30 vampires of varying ages, watched me with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Miss Emma Collins, the king announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space, who has agreed to serve as the prince's personal companion and tutor. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I felt dozens of ancient eyes assessing me, measuring my worth. The great doors at the end of the hall swung open. A tall, lean vampire entered, flanked by 4 others. He moved with fluid grace, his silver-streaked black hair falling to his shoulders. His eyes, when they fixed on me, were the color of tarnished gold. Marcus Vale, the king acknowledged coolly. You arrive earlier than expected. Concerning news travels fast, Your Majesty. Vale's voice was melodic, almost hypnotic. He approached the dais, stopping several paces from where I stood. I see the rumors are true. You've taken a human into your household. His gaze slid to me, then back to the king. A Collins, no less. Miss Collins is here at my invitation, the king replied, to assist with my son's education. Vale's smile didn't reach his eyes. Is that what we're calling it now? I had heard it was something more medical in nature. He turned to face the court. My friends, I come before you with grave concerns. For 3 years, rumors have circulated about Prince Lucas's condition. A blood curse, they say. A bloodthirst that cannot be controlled. The king's expression remained impassive, but I felt the tension radiating from him. Such rumors are dangerous, Vale continued. They suggest weakness in the royal line, instability. He gestured toward me. And now we find a human empath installed in the palace. The first Collins to serve the Hale throne in half a century. She doesn't serve the throne. Lucas's clear voice rang out suddenly. She helps me. All eyes turned to the young prince. Vale's expression softened to one of practiced concern. Of course, Your Highness, and we all wish for your well-being. He turned back to the court. But we must ask ourselves, if the prince requires such specialized assistance, is he fit to be heir? Is the Hale bloodline still strong enough to lead us? The king rose in one fluid motion. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Choose your next words carefully, Marcus, he said, his voice dangerously soft. You approach treason. Vale bowed, the gesture just short of mocking. I speak only out of concern for our people, Your Majesty. These are uncertain times. The human world presses closer to our borders each year. We need strong leadership. And you believe you could provide it? The king asked. The Vale clan has always stood ready to serve. Vale's eyes gleamed with ambition barely concealed. I felt a sudden shift in the air, a tension that raised the hair on my arms. Lucas swayed slightly beside his father, his small hand reaching up to clutch at the king's sleeve. I recognized the signs immediately. The bloodthirst was rising. Without thinking, I moved toward the dais. Damon stepped forward to block my path, but the king raised a hand, stopping him. I climbed the steps and knelt before Lucas, taking his trembling hands in mine. Look at me, I whispered. His eyes, already beginning to rim with red, found mine. Feel it rising? Let it come to me instead. The court watched in stunned silence as I placed my palms against Lucas's cheeks. The connection formed instantly. That strange electric current flowing between us. I felt the hunger surge into me, a wave of desperate need that broke harmlessly against my consciousness. Lucas exhaled shakily, his eyes clearing. It's better, he whispered. It's going away. I nodded, still holding him steady. I know. Just breathe. When I finally stood and turned, the entire court stared in disbelief. Marcus Vale's face had lost its composed mask, revealing naked shock. Impossible, he whispered. The king placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, his eyes meeting mine with something like gratitude before he addressed Vale. As you can see, my son's condition is being managed. Miss Collins possesses her family's gift in full measure. His voice hardened. The Hale line remains strong, and my son remains my heir. If you wish to challenge either fact, I invite you to do so formally, with all the consequences such a challenge entails. Vale recovered his composure quickly, offering another bow. No challenge, Your Majesty. Merely observations. His eyes lingered on me, though I wonder if the court realizes the implications of having a Collins empath in the royal household once more. History has a way of repeating itself after all. With that cryptic statement hanging in the air, he withdrew, his entourage following silently behind him. As the court dispersed in murmuring clusters, the king leaned down to speak quietly to his son. Lucas nodded, then surprised me by throwing his arms around my waist in a quick hug before running off toward Helen, who waited at a side door. The king descended the dais steps to stand beside me. "You felt it coming," he said, before anyone else noticed. "Yes, it's like a storm gathering. I can sense the pressure building." He studied me with new intensity. "Vale will not give up so easily. What happened here today only makes you more valuable and more of a target. Because I can help Lucas? Because you represent a power neither human nor vampire, a bridge between worlds." His voice lowered. "And because Marcus Vale remembers what happened the last time a Collins woman stood at a Hale king's side." Before I could ask what he meant, Damon approached urgently. "My king, we've received reports of unusual activity at the eastern border. Vale's men have been seen meeting with unknown humans." The king's expression darkened. "Increase the guard. I want hourly reports." He turned back to me. "We'll continue this conversation later, Miss Collins. For now, I suggest you rest. Absorbing the bloodthirst takes a toll, even on one with your abilities." As if his words had made it real, exhaustion swept through me suddenly, making my knees buckle. The king caught my elbow, steadying me. His touch was cool against my skin. "Thank you," I murmured, "for letting me help him." Something shifted in his gaze, a softening I hadn't seen before. "No, Miss Collins. Thank you for giving my son what I could not." Over the next weeks, a strange new rhythm established itself in the palace. Each morning, I tutored Lucas in the library, teaching him history, literature, and mathematics. His quick mind absorbed knowledge hungrily, though he preferred stories to sums. 3 times, the bloodthirst rose in him without warning. Each time I was there to draw it away, the process becoming smoother with practice. And each time I noticed the curse took longer to return, as if my intervention was somehow weakening its hold. The palace itself seemed to change around us. Curtains that had been perpetually drawn were opened to admit sunlight. Rooms long unused were aired and cleaned. Flowers appeared in vases where before there had been only dust and shadow. "It hasn't been like this since the Queen was alive," Helen confided one afternoon, as we watched Lucas playing in the garden, his laughter carrying through the open window. "He's different with you here. Happier." "And the king?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Helen's knowing look told me I'd failed. "The king is thawing, slowly," she smiled. "He asked about your favorite books yesterday. Said the library might need some updating." I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the sunshine streaming through the window. In our brief interactions, a shared meal here, a conversation about Lucas's progress there, I'd glimpsed something beneath the king's cold exterior, a capacity for kindness, for change. One evening, I found him in the music room, playing a haunting melody on the grand piano. I'd paused in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, but he'd sensed my presence anyway. "My wife taught me," he'd said, fingers still moving over the keys. "She believed music was the closest thing to magic humans had created." "It's beautiful," I'd told him. "Yes," he'd agreed, looking not at the piano but at me. "Some things are." But beneath these moments of warming, tensions simmered. Marcus Vale remained at court, his presence a constant reminder of the threat he posed. Whispers reached us of other clans questioning the Hale leadership. And twice more, unknown humans were spotted near the palace grounds, only to vanish before the guards could apprehend them. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke to screaming, Lucas's voice high with terror. Before I was fully conscious, I was running down the corridor to his chambers, my nightgown billowing around my bare feet. I burst through his door to find him thrashing on his bed, caught in the grip of a nightmare so powerful it had manifested physically. The air around him shimmered with a reddish haze, and his skin glowed as if lit from within. Lucas! I reached for him, but the energy surrounding him repelled my touch like a physical barrier. The king appeared beside me, his face tight with fear. It's never been like this before. The curse is evolving, I realized aloud. It's fighting back against my influence. Lucas's eyes flew open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. They glowed solid red, no pupil, no iris, just crimson light pouring from the sockets. She's coming, he said, his voice layered with other older voice beneath it. She's found a way back in. Victoria, the king breathed, the name like a curse itself. I pushed against the barrier again, harder this time, focusing all my will on breaking through. Lucas, listen to me. It's Emma, I'm here. The barrier flickered. I pressed my advantage, reaching with both my hands and my mind toward the frightened boy trapped inside the curse's manifestation. Fight it, Lucas. Push it toward me, like we've practiced. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the barrier shattered like glass, the shards of energy dissipating into the air. I caught Lucas as he fell forward, his body suddenly limp in my arms. But instead of the curse flowing into me as it had before, something else happened. As I held him, a vision exploded behind my eyes. A woman with flame-red hair and eyes like blood, her hands weaving complex patterns in the air. Around her, a circle of humans chanted in a language I didn't recognize. She's performing a ritual, I gasped, the vision burning through my mind. Victoria, she's trying to strengthen the curse from afar. The king's hand gripped my shoulder. What do you see? A cave, somewhere in the forest. There's water. I can hear it rushing nearby. The vision shifted, showing me a familiar face among the chanters. Marcus Vale is with her. Lucas convulsed in my arms, a cry of pain tearing from his throat. The red glow returned, spreading across his skin like a web of fire. She's killing him, I realized with horror. The ritual is accelerating the curse. The king's face transformed with fury. Damon! He roared, and somehow the security advisor was there instantly, as if he'd been waiting just outside. Gather the guard. Victoria Harlow has returned. She's in the caves by the eastern falls. As Damon rushed to obey, I fought to maintain my hold on Lucas, who writhed in my grip, the curse burning hotter. I can't stop it, I admitted, panic rising in my throat. It's too strong this time. The king knelt beside us, his face a mask of desperate determination. Then we fight it together. He placed his hands over mine where they held Lucas. Your blood and mine. Perhaps that's what's needed. The moment his skin touched mine, something extraordinary happened. The connection between Lucas and me, already strong, expanded to include his father. I felt the king's centuries of power, his fierce love for his son, his ancient grief, all of it flowing into me and through me. Together, we pushed back against the curse, forcing it to retreat. Lucas's breathing steadied, the red glow fading from his skin. It's working, I whispered. The king's eyes met mine over his son's head, wonder and something deeper reflected there. You're stronger than Evelyn ever was, he said softly. Lucas stirred between us, his eyes fluttering open, normal eyes, deep brown and confused. Father? Emma? What happened? Before either of us could answer, Damon reappeared at the door, his face grim. My king, we've secured the palace, but there's more. Victoria Harlow hasn't just returned. She's raised an army. Vale's clan has officially broken allegiance, and they march with her. They'll reach our gates by dawn. The king rose, his decision immediate. Prepare our defenses. Evacuate the human staff to the secure bunkers. He looked down at Lucas, then at me. Miss Collins, take my son to the hidden chamber beneath the library. It was built to withstand both physical and magical attacks. What about you? I asked, unable to keep the fear from my voice. His expression softened for just a moment. I must defend my kingdom. Father, no! Lucas cried, reaching for him. Don't leave us! The king embraced his son fiercely. I will return. I promise you. He looked at me over Lucas's head. Keep him safe, Emma. It was the first time he'd used my given name. The sound of it in his voice made my heart clench with emotions I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. I will, I promised. As he turned to leave, a tremendous crash shook the palace foundations. Plaster rained down from the ceiling. They're here already, Damon said, his voice tight with disbelief. How? Another crash, closer this time. The bedroom windows shattered inward, sending glass spraying across the floor. Through the broken panes, I saw the night sky glowing orange with fire. The eastern defenses have fallen, the king realized. We've been betrayed from within. Lucas pressed against me, trembling. I held him close, trying to shield him from the chaos erupting around us. The king turned to us, his decision made. Change of plans. The three of us go together. Now. As he spoke, the bedroom door burst inward. Victoria Harlow stood in the shattered doorway, her red hair wild around her face, her eyes glowing with triumph and madness. Hello, Rowan, she purred. Did you miss me? The king's face hardened into granite as he locked eyes with Victoria. Without turning, he pushed Lucas behind him with one arm while the other shot forward. A blast of power surged from his palm, catching Victoria mid-stride and throwing her backward into the hallway. Emma, take Lucas, now, he commanded, his voice resonating with authority I'd never heard before. I grabbed Lucas's trembling hand and pulled him toward the hidden panel near the fireplace. Behind us, furniture splintered as the king and Victoria clashed. The air crackled with ancient power. But father, Lucas cried, resisting my pull. He'll follow us, I promised, though fear clenched my stomach. Trust me. The hidden door slid open at my touch. The king had keyed it to my fingerprints weeks ago, I realized. As we slipped inside, I caught one last glimpse of the battle. Victoria lunging with inhuman speed, the king's cloak billowing as he met her charge, and Damon appearing in the doorway, fangs bared, joining the fight. The passage sealed behind us, plunging us into darkness before soft blue lights illuminated along the floor. Lucas pressed against me, his small body shaking. He'll be okay, I whispered, wishing I believed it myself. Your father is stronger than she is. We descended deeper beneath the palace, following the glowing path. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by our hurried footsteps and Lucas's ragged breathing. When we reached the chamber, I sealed the heavy door behind us and surveyed our sanctuary, a small room with stone walls, stocked with supplies, a communication device, and 2 narrow beds. Lucas sat on one bed, hugging his knees to his chest. Victoria wants to kill me, he said quietly. She always has. I knelt before him. Why would she want that? Because I'm different, because of what happened to Mother. His eyes, so like his father's, met mine. She thinks I should never have been born. My heart ached for him. Lucas, listen to me. Your life matters. You matter. He shook his head. You don't understand. The curse. A sudden pounding at the door cut him off. We both froze. "Emma! Lucas!" The king's voice, strained but unmistakable. I rushed to the door, checking the small security screen. The king stood alone, his clothing torn and bloodied, but alive. I unlocked the door, and he stumbled inside, immediately embracing Lucas. "Victoria?" I asked as I resealed the door. "Contained for now. Damon is holding her." He winced as he straightened. "We don't have much time. The palace is compromised." "How did she get past the wards?" I asked. "Marcus Vale." The king's expression darkened. "He granted her access during the diplomatic meetings. They've been planning this for months." Lucas looked up at his father. "They want me dead." The king knelt, gripping his son's shoulders. "I will never let that happen." "But the Blood Council. The council doesn't understand what we've learned." The king's eyes flicked to me. "What Emma has helped us discover about your condition." I stepped closer. "The journals from Dr. Price confirm it. Lucas's bloodthirst isn't a curse. It's a mutation. It can be managed, controlled." The king nodded. "But Victoria and Marcus want to use ancient laws to condemn him. They've called an emergency council session." My stomach dropped. "When?" "Tonight. They're gathering now in the Great Hall." He stood, grimacing with pain. "I must face them." "We'll face them," I corrected. The king and Lucas both looked at me with surprise. "I've studied the ancient texts with Dr. Price. I know more about Lucas's condition than anyone except her. And as a human, I can testify to his control, that he's never harmed me, despite countless opportunities." The king shook his head. "The council has not allowed human testimony in over 3 centuries. Then it's time they made an exception." I straightened my spine. "You said yourself the old ways need to change." A small smile touched his lips. "So I did." Lucas took my hand. "I want Emma to come." The king studied us both, then nodded. "Very well. But stay close to me at all times. The council chamber will be hostile territory." We prepared quickly. The king cleaned his wounds and changed into formal attire stored in the chamber. I straightened my uniform as best I could, wishing I had something more impressive to wear before the most powerful vampires in the realm. As if reading my thoughts, the king opened a small cabinet and removed a midnight blue cloak with silver embroidery. "This belonged to my wife," he said quietly. "She would want you to wear it." I accepted it with trembling hands. "I'm honored." "It's more than ceremony," he explained as he helped me fasten it. "The fabric is woven with protective enchantments." The cloak settled around my shoulders, surprisingly light despite its heavy appearance. Lucas watched with wide eyes. "You look like you belong with us," he whispered. The king's hand lingered on my shoulder. "She does." We left through a different passage, one that led directly to the Great Hall. As we walked, the king briefed me on council protocol. "Speak only when addressed. Show deference but not weakness. And whatever happens, do not show fear. They can sense it." I nodded, my mouth dry. "What are our chances?" He didn't answer immediately. "The council has 13 members. I need 7 votes to protect Lucas. 3 are already loyal to me. 2 more might be persuaded." "And the others?" "In Victoria's pocket. Or Marcus's." His jaw tightened. "They've been working to undermine me since Elizabeth died." We reached the end of the passage. The king paused, his hand on the hidden door. "Emma," he said softly, "thank you. For everything you've done for my son. For us." Before I could respond, he pushed open the door and we stepped into a small antechamber adjacent to the great hall. The sounds of dozens of voices filtered through the heavy oak doors ahead. "Remember," the king whispered, "hold your head high. You have earned your place here." With Lucas between us, we entered the great hall. The vast chamber fell silent as we appeared. 13 figures in formal robes sat in a semicircle on a raised dais. Before them, Victoria and Marcus stood side by side, turning to face us with identical expressions of contempt. Dozens of other vampires, nobles, advisors, and witnesses lined the walls. "King Rowan," intoned the eldest council member, a white-haired woman with eyes like polished obsidian, "you arrive at last." "Elder Isolde," the king acknowledged with a slight bow. "I was delayed by an unauthorized attack on my private quarters." Victoria stepped forward. "An attack? How dramatic. I merely came to ensure the safety of the young prince, given the concerns about his condition." "By breaking through warded doors," the king countered. Marcus Vale moved to Victoria's side. "The council has authorized protective custody of the child until his condition can be properly assessed." "You have no such authority," the king said coldly. Elder Isolde raised a gnarled hand. "We are gathered to determine precisely that question of authority, Rowan, and to address the matter of your heir's affliction." Lucas pressed closer to me, and I placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "And who," Victoria asked with exaggerated curiosity, "is this human you bring before the sacred council?" All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of their ancient gazes, some curious, others hostile. "This is Emma Collins," the king said. "She has been instrumental in my son's care and has insights into his condition that the council should hear." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Humans do not address the council," Marcus objected. "Actually," I said, unable to stay silent, "according to the Covenant of 1723, humans with specialized knowledge may testify in matters concerning human-vampire relations." The chamber went utterly still. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "The maid has studied our laws?" she asked incredulously. "I have," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Along with the medical journals of Dr. Marin Price, who has spent decades researching blood hunger mutations." Elder Isolde leaned forward. "You claim the prince's condition is a mutation, not the ancient curse?" "I do." I took a deep breath. "And I can prove it." "This is absurd," Victoria hissed. "She is merely a servant infatuated with her master." The accusation stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "My feelings are irrelevant. The evidence speaks for itself." "Let her speak," said a younger council member, a man with copper-colored hair. "I would hear this evidence." Elder Isolde considered, then nodded. "Approach, human." I moved forward, conscious of every eye upon me. Lucas squeezed my hand once before letting go. "The ancient curse, as described in your texts, manifests in specific ways," I began. "Uncontrollable bloodlust at all times, inability to consume regular food, physical deterioration, mental regression." I gestured toward Lucas. "Prince Lucas experiences none of these symptoms consistently. His hunger comes in waves, triggered by specific stimuli. He eats normal food. He is physically healthy and mentally advanced for his age." I reached into the pocket of the cloak and withdrew a small vial of blood. My blood, drawn by Dr. Price for her tests. "This is my blood," I said, holding it up. "I have been in close contact with Prince Lucas for months. According to your laws, if he were truly cursed, he would have attacked me long ago." Victoria laughed. "A theatrical demonstration proves nothing." Then perhaps this will. I nodded to the king, who produced a leather-bound journal from inside his robes. Dr. Price's complete findings, he said, placing it on the central table, including the genetic markers that distinguish the prince's condition from the ancient curse. Marcus stepped forward. Even if this is true, the boy remains dangerous. He has attacked servants. Early incidents, before we understood his triggers, I countered. There have been no incidents in over 3 months. Because you keep him isolated, Victoria exclaimed. No, I said firmly. Because we've developed protocols to manage his condition, the same way diabetic humans manage theirs. A ripple of surprise moved through the council. You compare a blood curse to a human disease? Marcus asked, scandalized. I compare a manageable condition to other manageable conditions, I replied. Prince Lucas isn't cursed. He's different, and difference shouldn't be a death sentence. The chamber erupted in voices, some outraged, others thoughtful. Elder Isolde raised her hand again, and silence fell. These claims require verification, she said. We will examine the evidence. Victoria moved suddenly, too fast for human eyes to track. She appeared beside Lucas, gripping his arm. Why wait? She snarled. Let's test the boy's control now. Before anyone could react, she slashed her own wrist with a long nail and thrust the bleeding wound toward Lucas's face. No! I cried out, lunging forward. Lucas recoiled, turning his face away despite the fresh blood inches from his nose. The king moved with supernatural speed, tearing Victoria away from his son and throwing her across the chamber. You dare! He roared, his eyes blazing red. But my attention stayed on Lucas, who stood trembling but controlled, his eyes squeezed shut, using the techniques we'd practiced for months. Look, I said, pointing. Look at him. The council members leaned forward, watching in astonishment as Lucas fought his instincts and won. Breathe through it, Lucas, I encouraged, moving to his side. Count the breaths like we practiced. He nodded, inhaling shakily. 1, 2, 3. Victoria picked herself up, her face contorted with rage. This proves nothing. A momentary control means nothing when... When what? I interrupted. When he's proven he can resist fresh blood thrust directly in his face? What more proof do you need? The law is clear, Marcus insisted. Those with the blood curse must be. The law was written before we understood what we were seeing, the king cut in. Before science gave us new insights. Elder Isolde stood slowly. In all my centuries, I have never seen a child with the supposed curse demonstrate such control. Because it's not the curse, I said quietly. It never was. The copper-haired council member approached Lucas cautiously. May I? He asked, extending his hand. Lucas looked to his father, who nodded. The council member touched Lucas's forehead gently, closing his eyes in concentration. There is darkness there, he murmured, but not the mindless hunger of the cursed. There is consciousness, control. He opened his eyes, looking surprised. The human speaks truth, Victoria hissed. Tristan, you've always been soft. This boy is an abomination. He is my son, the king said, his voice deadly quiet, and heir to this kingdom. A kingdom you've weakened with your grief and sentiment, Marcus accused. Allowing humans into our inner circles, ignoring ancient traditions. Perhaps some traditions deserve to be questioned, said a voice from the back of the chamber. Dr. Marin Price stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming in the candlelight. I've studied blood disorders for 40 years. The prince's condition is unique but manageable. My complete findings are in that journal. Victoria looked from Dr. Price to me, her eyes narrowing. You planned this. All of this. We planned to save an innocent child, I replied. Yes. Elder Isolde returned to her seat, gesturing for the other council members to do the same. We will deliberate. The next hour was the longest of my life. The king, Lucas, and I waited in a small antechamber while the council discussed our fate. Dr. Price joined us, explaining how she'd slipped into the palace through passages known only to the medical staff. Helen helped me, she said with a small smile. She's quite resourceful for a housekeeper. Lucas sat beside me, his head resting against my arm. Are they going to take me away? He whispered. No, the king and I said simultaneously. Finally, we were summoned back. The council members sat in their places, faces impassive. Victoria and Marcus stood to one side, tense with anticipation. Elder Isolde spoke first. We have examined the evidence and heard testimony. This case has no precedent. I held my breath. The child shows control that defies our understanding of the ancient curse. Dr. Price's research suggests a new classification is needed. She looked directly at Lucas. We find that Prince Lucas Hale does not bear the curse as defined in our laws. Victoria stepped forward. This is outrageous. Silence, Elder Isolde commanded. The council has spoken. Prince Lucas will remain under his father's guardianship, with continued monitoring and research into his condition. Relief flooded through me. Lucas grabbed my hand, squeezing tightly. Furthermore, Elder Isolde continued, we find Victoria Harlow and Marcus Vale guilty of conspiracy against the crown. They will be confined until a full investigation is completed. Guards moved to surround Victoria and Marcus. Victoria's face contorted with fury. This isn't over, she spat. The boy is still a danger. One day, he'll prove me right. Perhaps, the king said evenly, but he'll face that day with those who love him at his side. As Victoria and Marcus were led away, the council members dispersed. Elder Isolde approached us last. You've changed things today, she told the king. Not all will welcome it. Change was long overdue, he replied. She turned to me. And you, human? Few of your kind would stand before the council as you did. I inclined my head. I only did what was right. Indeed, a hint of a smile touched her ancient face. The king has chosen his son's guardian well. With that, she departed, leaving the three of us alone in the vast chamber. Lucas looked up at me. Does this mean you'll stay with us now? Forever? The question caught me off guard. I looked at the king, uncertain. If she wishes to, he said softly. My contract was for 1 year, I said, remembering the formal document I'd signed months ago. The king stepped closer. Some arrangements deserve renegotiation. In his eyes, I saw something I'd been afraid to acknowledge, a reflection of my own feelings, carefully guarded until now. I'd like to stay, I said simply. Lucas threw his arms around my waist. Good. We need you. Over his head, the king's eyes met mine. Yes, he agreed quietly. We do. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new quarters in the East Wing, watching the sun rise over the kingdom. So much had changed. Victoria and Marcus remained imprisoned, awaiting final judgment. Dr. Price had established a permanent research facility in the palace, studying Lucas's condition and developing protocols for others who might share it. The door behind me opened, and Lucas bounded out, followed by his father. Emma, Father says we can visit the lake today. You'll come too, won't you? I smiled. Of course. The king joined me at the railing while Lucas chattered about fishing plans. The morning light caught in his dark hair, softening his features. Happy? He asked quietly. I considered the question. My life had transformed entirely from the desperate young woman who'd arrived seeking any employment. I now held an official position as Lucas's guardian and educational advisor, with a seat on the King's Council. I had purpose, respect, and something else. Something still new and tender between the king and me, growing slowly in the aftermath of crisis. Yes, I answered honestly. I am. Lucas tugged at my hand. Can we have breakfast on the terrace? Helen made those pastries you like. That sounds perfect. As we turned to go inside, the king's hand brushed mine, our fingers intertwining briefly. The touch sent warmth through me, a promise of possibilities unfolding. The palace no longer felt like a fortress of secrets and shadows. Sunlight streamed through newly opened curtains, illuminating ancient halls that had too long remained in darkness. Somewhere distant, I heard Helen humming as she went about her morning duties, a simple, human sound in this supernatural world. Lucas ran ahead of us, his laughter echoing down the corridor, the sound of a child unburdened, at least for now, by the weight of difference. The king and I followed more slowly, no longer employer and employee, not quite equals, but finding our way towards something new. The scent of fresh pastries and coffee drifted from the terrace. Outside, the kingdom stretched before us, bathed in morning light, a world of shadows and sunlight, of ancient powers and new beginnings. And somehow, improbably, I had found my place within it.